you know about the Osiris Shaft? How they've got a
I
scanned?
discovered it.
Yeah, you did, right?
Yes.
Do you know that they use this tomographic?
No, I am the one who found it. This not.
No, I understand you found it, but they also discovered it. They showed that it exists using the same technique.
No.
Jamie, pull up that.
This is wrong. This is not true at all. I can tell you how I found that.
I'll tell you.
How can I find the Osiris Shaft?
I'm not saying that you didn't find it. It's under the paper Signature Aperture Radar Doppler Tomography by Filippo Bondi. And if you scroll down, Jamie, you'll see an image. And this image is of the Osiris Shaft, which shows that they got an accurate depiction of that from space.
That's not true.
From satellite. It's not true.
No.
So what are you saying, that they're lying?
They're lying.
Right here.
They're completely lying.
But if they're showing, using these techniques, things that we know that you discovered that absolutely exist.
Now, these techniques, as I told you, scientists said that these techniques cannot show 600 feet under the pyramid. The Osiris Shaft that I found was only 50 feet.
Right, but it's showing at least for 50 feet that this is accurate. What makes you believe those scientists rather than these guys from Italy?
Because because the scientists are scientists.
Well, these are scientists as well.
They are not showing their techniques carefully. They have not.
What do you mean they're not showing their techniques carefully?
Take the techniques that they said and show it to any scientist. No one can tell you this is accurate. I asked every person who knows about radar, ultrasound, all the people work with me. The Scan Pyramid project, they said this is bullshit. It cannot happen at all.
I have to say that technology works. Why? Because if the people and the scientific community can spend just 2 seconds to watch the structure of the tomb of Osiris and the correspective tomography, it's very clear that the technology works. Yeah. It's very clear because the tomography exactly to the structure of the tomb of Osiris. The only difference is that we discover that the tomb goes straight in the deep of the earth at 200 meters down, where there is another chamber to investigate.
That's 2 radically different takes on the same claim. One was from Egypt's most famous archaeologist, Zahi Hawass, and the other was from a leading advocate of the radar tomography data, so one of the Italian scientists. So what's really going on with the Osiris Shaft? To dig deeper, I spoke with Trevor Grassi, a researcher who's been working directly with the team behind the scans and who's been following this story from the start.
Why are you preventing further research from taking place when we at least clearly have enough evidence to suggest it requires an on-site investigation? It's obvious to everyone. Who would be against that, whether they believe these scans or not? We have the anomalies. We have GPR views of these entrances into the chambers the Coffer Project's showing us now. I'll tell you something that I haven't said publicly at all yet, but I brought my endoscope last trip, and I did along the entire Sphinx Causeway.
Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files. Thanks for being here at Lehto Files. Did you know anyone can access your internet traffic, especially on hotel Wi-Fi or public networks? And that's why I started using a virtual private network. I'm excited to announce Lehto Files' first official sponsor, Private Internet Access. So a VPN works by encrypting your internet connection. So no one, not hackers, not your internet provider, not even the government, can see what you're doing online. I use PIA to bypass censorship and access content. For example, Rick and Morty isn't on Netflix in the US, but if you connect through a UK or German server, it shows right up. PIA also works across all my devices at once, so laptop, phone, and tablet, doesn't matter. One account covers everything, which makes it super convenient. If you use my link, piavpn.com/LehtoFiles, you'll get 83% off. That's just $2.03 a month, plus 4 extra months for free. The link's also in the description. So please consider it. Supporting our sponsors helps keep Lehto Files going. Now back to the show. Trevor Grassi, he's an independent researcher. He spent nearly 2 decades investigating the underground mysteries of Giza. He's also visited over 100 ancient sites across a dozen countries. He's worked closely with civil engineer Bill Brown on ground penetrating radar scans at Giza and is currently producing the Secret Underworld of Giza documentary series. So while Trevor isn't directly involved in the specific SAR tomography controversy, I think you're definitely attached to it. So, he's been exploring these underground claims from the ground level. Literally, when we were just talking to Biondi, he actually showed up, and they were talking about actual videos on the ground around Giza. So I think Trevor's working with this for sure. So he's been down in the tunnels, worked with the radar data, and has a unique perspective. So this is some behind the scenes content.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of context behind this that could be, I think, very interesting to a lot of the patrons. And I want to thank you too for making a great film about this when everyone was going crazy over it. And yeah, like we've been talking about, nobody really has much of an idea. There's a lot of disinformation and ideas being thrown around out there. But yeah, I have worked with like Bill, what he's been doing for 20 years there. He was doing GPR scans. So we're talking on the ground, actual ground penetrating radar. But so much of what we have done already correlates with what the Coffer Project is doing now. So happy to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I actually had a video all scripted and ready to record and everything. And then I ended up doing the JFK files, but it was on the Osiris Shaft, because I was amazed. Again, we were talking before, like all these people that have no authority or no knowledge on any of this stuff say it can't be possible. So this scan, which came from the end of their initial press conference, the 15 March press conference, and then Rogan brought it up with Zahi Hawass. And
Mhm.
I was so stoked to have that interview with Biondi, man. The timing was just amazing when Hawass is on there saying it's bullshit and they're completely lying. Just these amazing claims. But then, and Rogan's like, but what about the Osiris Shaft? You know,
That was
like they showed
hilarious.
the Osiris Shaft.
He kept saying like, "Well, they scanned it," and Zahi keeps going. I discovered it. I found it. And Rogan's just trying to say not that they discovered the Osiris Shaft, but that they used it as proof of the method. And Zahi's just not getting it. And yeah, besides the fact that Zahi did not discover the Osiris Shaft, Salim Hassan, a great Egyptologist, he discovered it back in 1933. It was known about in ancient history, but it was Salim Hassan who discovered it, and then it was other friends of mine who discovered the third level, and I'm going to get into very deep into the Osiris Shaft very soon in a couple different films. Actually, one whole film just about that, and the people who originally discovered the sarcophagus on the third level, and then yeah, it's also going to be in this film I'm getting ready to release, hopefully this weekend. It's going to be uh, a whole full documentary about the Coffer Project and all the evidence that people aren't seeing yet, contradicting all these critics who are trying to bring arguments that mean nothing. And like you say, people are out there being like, this can't happen. It's impossible. You can't even do that with SAR. There's no way you could adapt it even. They have no clue what they're talking about. Meanwhile, we're seeing it working right before our eyes.
Yeah.
And the Osiris Shaft here is just one of the examples to show that. So it's getting comical that people are still denying it when they're seeing it work.
And that's why I guess I'm not concerned, if the technology is real, and it certainly looks that way, then it'll just continue. Like it'll be proven out as true. And that's kind of the impression I got just talking with Biondi for those first few minutes, just a few minutes, is he seemed overtasked. Obviously, it seems like there's a ton of stuff going on, but it's him like working, like working through more examples and
Yeah. Well, I don't think he's very worried about it. I think all of us on the inside close to it really know that time is going to tell. You
Yeah.
know, these people are going to figure it out eventually, but he doesn't have to worry about that. He's not trying to protect any illusion here.
Yeah.
He's got the truth, and the truth can stand on its own. It doesn't really, so yeah, I think he's calm, but he's also very overwhelmed. They've got so much. I know because I'm giving them half people are coming through me to be like, can you invite the guys to this conference or to an interview or different things? And I'm sending him all these offers, the whole team, and I can tell that it's been harder for them to get back to me quick more recently. They're getting swamped and flooded with so many different things to take care of, I know, but yeah, I think that they're very confident, that it's going to stand on its own. Especially, one of the things is everyone's being like, how did they get from this image to this whole model? And people are referencing 2 or 3 of these scans of the interior of the coffer pyramid, specifically from the original project abstract, and saying, like, how did they build this whole model? People are not realizing this is one of the most foolish challenges to bring to it, because obviously they're not saying they built these models based on these 2 pictures, which were a sample that they originally showed. And like he just told us both a couple minutes ago,
Yeah.
um, they well, like he said in the interview with Jay Anderson, he said, we're working with about 200 tomographies, tomographic lines, 200 angles and images to build those models. So he said, like, what they've revealed so far is about 5% of the actual scan images that they have. None of us have seen how much data they're working with. And I know that so many more of these scan images will be presented alongside their models when they come out with their written report about it, which Filippo had said in my interview. He said this would be out probably by June or July, but we'll have to see, because again, he's so busy. So they're working really hard on this, and they're going to have a lot more stuff coming out soon.
Please take a second to hit the like button if you're enjoying this and consider subscribing to get future notifications of my work. And I couldn't do it without the support of patrons and YouTube subscribers. You can find those links in the description. Please consider supporting the channel. Really couldn't do it without your help. Are you knowledgeable on the scan pyramids? Like, do you know any of the guys on the team? And
Um, I know Dr. Hawass, not personally. We are going to be meeting this year, and we are going to be talking with them, and we are going to be actually Biondi and Armando May and myself, at least, are going to be speaking at a conference with Dr. Hawass
okay,
in September in Dubai.
nice.
This is a pretty big one that was only just released. The poster for this actually came out the same day as his Rogan interview, which was really, wow, what a synchronicity, because Joe Rogan actually forced Zahi to say, basically, he was like, well, what if you could talk to them? Would you talk to them? Would you speak to the Coffer Project?
Yeah,
And Hawass basically had to say, sure, okay, yeah, I would. But I don't think he realized. I mean, he did realize he signed up for this, conference we're doing. It's called the Galactic Discoveries Exchange in Dubai on November 8th through 9th. And so this
nice.
came out the very same day. He ended up saying I would speak to them. And another mutual friend of mine and Hawass is going to be there, Elena Danan, who he has worked with in Egypt. She spent 9 years basically working in Egypt from the 90s. And yeah, we have a very unique opportunity to speak with him about that. But, technically he is at the head of the Scan Pyramids project. And the Scan Pyramids project has been working for a decade already. I was in the Great Pyramid down in the subterranean chamber, seeing their scan equipment running. It was like these huge machines. Most of it's not machinery; it's just plates that are sensors picking up the muons that move through the stone. But yeah, we were in there when they were doing all this work. I was there with Dr. Robert Schoch, geophysicist, geologist, Dr. Robert Schoch, who analyzed all the subsurface strata of the Sphinx analyzed all the precipitation-induced weathering on the Sphinx courtyard, did all this work with John Anthony West, who was my first real friend and teacher, got me a guide for me as I first started learning all of this. So I've been following Shock forever, and he's one of the people to ask, when it comes to geology and stone.
Hmm.
As I'm saying, like, how accurate are the muon scans? Is that really going to give us an idea of everything that's left? But fact is, the Pyramids team has come up with practically nothing. Over 10 years, using not only muon scanning, but thermal imaging and like these X-ray type, all different remote sensing technologies that you can use from the ground. And with all of these techniques, they're literally just showing us at the end these two hazy zones that have they're not even showing us the orientation, the size, shape, location. They're giving us very rough idea of this big void over the Grand Gallery and this hazy zone of the North Face corridor, which finally they did get the endoscope footage of, which you covered very well, and describing how before 2023, the North Face corridor was, according to the Scan Pyramids team, this amorphous blob of area that could have something empty up or down or over. They
Huh.
didn't know the size, shape, exact location. But as you pointed out, it wasn't the coffer project, but two of them at least, Corrado and Filippo, before Armando joined them. They gave us these perfect like measurements in meters, these, how big it was, that it was square, that it was coming straight back. They gave us all these details. And you're one of the only people who really acknowledged and gave them credit for that. So I
That
thank
that
you
was
for
one
that.
of my questions was to ask because I didn't know if there was communication. Like, did Filippo and Corrado did they know there was a small corridor there? I guess I wanted to get the intel, like you just said. I didn't have the background intel on how much they knew. I knew they didn't endoscope it until February 23, and that Filippo's paper came out in October 22. But I was curious if there was like chatter among the teams, like they used their GPR so they knew there was some corridor back there, or was it like you said, like it's this nebulous blob, and then all of a sudden Filippo just nails it down as this 2 meter, by 2 meter
Um,
corridor.
Yeah, I mean they were watching the Scam Pyramids team, I'm sure. And if the Scam Pyramids team had come out with something real before then, they were already years into their project and they had said there's maybe this thing behind the chevrons here, but we don't really know what it is.
Hmm.
I don't know. I imagine Filippo and Corrado just got sick of waiting and being like, come on, guys. And, they might not have bothered doing all of this if they had actually gotten results, seen results from the Scan Pyramids project. But after all these years with nothing, they were just like, all right, well, we've got a brilliant new technology that can do this. Let's show the world what's really inside the Great Pyramid. And of course, when you have the ministry in charge of a project, Hawass at the head of it, these, it's a cooperation between the University of Cairo and a couple Japanese universities. The Scan Pyramids team is. So that kind of thing, when it's an official project and it has to go through the official channels of the ministry, they're going to censor the reports. They're going to cut down as much as they can out of it at first, at least. And if they ever plan on releasing any parts of what they've really understood, they're going to do it very gradually and say, okay, here's one more piece and wait a year. And they want to slowly trickle it out so they can get more continuous booms to the tourism. And, if they are willing to share any of it, they'll do it very slowly. And, this is why circumventing that entire system is what allowed the Italian team to just drop this like it's hot back in 2022 and be like, hey, we found it all. We didn't need permission. Uh, this is for, if you, it's not like they didn't try to work with the ministry. They did send their information to the current minister at that time. They didn't get responses. It's expected. The ministry is not interested in anyone who's not working through their system that they can control and
Hmm.
make sure the media's what they want it to be. So, a few rogues coming in from another country that don't need on-site access, that are academically trained, real scientists, but independents who are willing to just go for it and say, look, we don't need the on-site permission, we don't need the permit. Here it is, world. This is what we're seeing. We're using free data from these great, Capella Space and Umbra, giving away the SAR data for free. So yeah, basically all they had to put in was their own time and their own energy to do this project, which, they've given years to this, and they are giving it to the world for free. So they absolutely just smashed the, Scam Pyramids team right out of the water. There's no comparison. After 10 years, they've given us 2 hazy zones to look at. The Kafka project gave us 20 well-defined structures within the Great Pyramid that no one has ever seen, including the 2 that the Scam Pyramids showed, but in much greater detail.
Well, that was amazing because they endoscoped it. Have any of the other, interior areas been confirmed or validated that they said or even considered?
Well, that's part of it. Like, for one thing, they said they didn't have to harm the pyramid in any way to get that endoscope in there, which means why wouldn't they have done that years ago or decades ago? Endoscopes are not a new technology. What, or did they do it a long time ago? Did they already know? Um, you know, that's something to consider as well. But have they had that endoscope footage before and didn't want to release it until they had to? And were just playing that they didn't really know what it looked like? Maybe not. But what's really important was when they released that press conference right in front of the pyramids, and Zahi got up on stage and he said, this is what he said. He said, there's one part in the floor that was not stone and that could be continuously excavated. So he said there was, at least one excavatable material. That means there's a continued path from the north face corridor. And for one thing, how does he know that if they haven't actually been inside? I couldn't see anything in the endoscope footage that indicated a dirt spot or a sand or something that could be cleared out. So, first of all, how did he know that without them actually being inside? Second of all, he basically said um, back then that we could expect within months to be seeing additional chambers past that point. So we're going on years now, but still nothing more about that. In fact, Zahi's diverting our attention down to Luxor, to his new golden city, things that are being discovered in other places. And yeah, I'm still waiting for him to answer. He said within months we could probably be, finding what he's calling potentially the tomb of Khufu, because he's still on this tomb idea. But yeah, we think the tomb of Khufu is somewhere around there, but it's not going to be inside the pyramid. So, yeah, I don't know. He told us that we could expect to get into further spaces through the North Face corridor within months. Those were his words in 2023. So I'm still waiting. This happens often. This happened with the Osiris Shaft as well. When he went in there, he took over the whole third level, saying it was the greatest discovery of his life, when really it was Slim Hassan originally, and then it was Boris Said and JJ Hertek really responsible for the expedition that found a lot of what was on the third level. And that's something I'll explain in some of my films soon. But that's another example. When he went in there, he took over, the entire project at the bottom, and there's this mud tunnel, we call it, leading out from the third level. And after a little ways, it splits off into 2. And the only person who has ever documented that tunnel and publicly revealed it is Richard Gabriel, who I'm working with my film Revealing NC2, and he's working with Bill and I. He's one of the 3 of us who we've just been really diving deep, trying to get real evidence and documentation. But he actually went into that tunnel, photographed it, took note of the angles and the direction it was going. No one has done that at all, except Zahi said, he sent in a young boy, like a small child, so to see how far he could crawl in. And then after that, he brought in a Japanese university to do an endoscope test of these mud tunnels from the third level. and they went way, way deep down into these tunnels. Like we
Is
don't
that
know exact.
from the Osiris Shaft, you mean? Like a third level from here?
Yeah, right from that third level there, the tunnels come out the side. Yeah, they'd never been documented. And then the Japanese endoscope footage, which went, we don't know, 50 meters, 100 meters, it went pretty deep down. I don't really know exactly how far, but it ended up breaking into this little cave structure. Um, but even that, the footage never came out. Hawass never released a report. He never told us anything more about it. And it's like, why? Why not? We got Richard Gabriel going in there, crawling, cramming himself into this skinny little tunnel as far as he could go to document it, but he's the only one who's ever done that. So yeah, that's why Richard's one of my friends, and that's why I'm not expecting Zahi to come forward with the reports he promised, because he hasn't done it in the past. When he does get to the bottom of these things, we end up just sitting here waiting. Like, where's that next announcement you said we'd get? He's going back to the air shafts and diverting attention to other things. It's like you said, within months we'd see more. Come on.
Is he still in charge? I thought there was a new guy in charge and Zahi
Zahi
retired.
has not Zahi has not had an official position within the ministry since 2011 when he was fired and arrested.
Really?
Um,
Man, I don't know any of this stuff.
That's officially what happened, and it was because of being caught up in some artifacts being sold like illegally. He got in trouble for that, and yet he still retains power. How does that work? Well, it's unofficial forms of power. He has things over people in the ministry. No one in the council of the ministry who gives permission for the permits is going to go against him, basically. But yeah, there was Mustafa Waziri took over as the head of the ministry, and then he actually got kicked out. And I'm not actually I can't I'm not actually sure who technically is the head of the ministry right now. But Waziri was there until a couple of years ago, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. He is not. Hawass has not had official power for a long time within the ministry. He gets all
Wow.
these projects, and he's the head of all the projects, but yeah, he that's been since 2011. He has not been the Minister of Antiquities, or the titles keep changing.
Wow.
Uh, it became the Supreme Council of Antiquities, which he was the minister of or something, and then they've changed the name. Now it's the Ministry of Antiquities and Tourism officially. So yeah, the way the power works is it's more through unofficial channels than official ones. It's
Yep.
about who you know, it's about who has dirt on who has blackmail, who's got the endorsements of the mafias and secret societies, and who's playing ball with the people that are going to allow them to get, you know, be basically understood to be someone who can control the narrative in the way that the people up in the top want it to look. That's pretty much. And Zahi's always played that role. He's always gotten these contracts with National Geographic and Smithsonian and things because he does a job of maintaining what kind of information comes out. You know, if he suddenly went against the timeline that the mainstream academia wants to keep in place, they would destroy him. They'd just destroy his reputation. They would threaten him. It's a cutthroat game in there. It's like um very complex mix of people within good people within the ministry too. I'd like to make a point of saying that even very high up, even in some of these Egyptian royal families and high in the government, there are actually good people. Some of them who know us and are working with us and want to help us. So that's part of the shifting dynamic of what's going on in the ministry and in the government that's potentially going to make this possible for us. There are some things we can do now without Hawass's permission, but for the most part, if we want to get the official permit to work where we want to work, we will need to either have him sign off on it or circumvent his ability to block it, because he has been the one blocking our permit basically for the last few years that we've been trying to get. But there are other reasons as well. We haven't really had the money up front to show, which is a pretty important part of it. You have to have the money to present with the application. So hopefully a few of those things are shifting this year, and we are very close now to getting our permit to work in some of the places you can see in Secret Underworld of Giza, the locations we're working on, which are technically two spots which are off the eastern wall of the plateau, which also makes it a little more possible. It's not technically within the plateau wall itself. So we're looking at tunnels that come in from the east, from the village of Naza El Saman there. So yeah.
When did you go with Robert Schoch?
In 2019, I first met him in 2018, but I knew of his work way back. 2006 was when I first met John Anthony West, and I knew about Robert back then. So yeah, it was actually at John West's memorial at his property with his family that I first met Robert Schoch. And then the next year, I'd been trying to save up my money for a dozen years at that point because I wanted to go with John, of course. But I wanted that to be my first trip. I knew that he was the best of the best, and I knew him personally, so it was the obvious choice. But I kind of saved up enough money to do a trip just as he got sick and passed in 2018, and so Robert actually stepped up and said, "All right, I know so many of you wanted to go with John and didn't get your chance." And he said, "I'll do a tour to Egypt next year." And this was with Oracle, which is an abbreviation of the Organization for the Research of Ancient Cultures, CUL. And that involved a couple other people, Catherine Ulysses, Schoch's wife. And we had 3 Egyptian guides, Muhammad Ibrahim, and a couple of others under him. And it
Cool.
was
So you did the same tour I did, but back in 2019.
Yeah, he released one, it sold out immediately. So he did a second one after it, that sold out immediately. And then he doubled the occupancy of the second one, and that sold out immediately. And then one person canceled, and there was a spot for me. I got the very last seat on the whole thing. So I got to go on the second of the 2. But it was an amazing tour. I mean, 2 weeks with Dr. Schoch all over Egypt. Yeah, it's something I do recommend if people are going to go for their first time, save up the money and do it with a group. Your second time, no, just go rogue, just go free, solo. But your first time, not to worry about the language, the transportation, the ticketing, the lodging, all of that stuff, food, just have it all taken care of. It's worth it to get a panorama of the whole country and just be able to focus on being in the temples, at the pyramids, and taking it all in without stressing about anything. I do recommend, because you're also going to support whatever researcher is hosting the trip. So I think it's a great idea to go your first time, at least save up and do a real tour, because afterwards you're going to have lists of, okay, I got to go back to this temple, that temple. I'm going to need a week over here. And yeah, you're going to be drawn to it. If you're the kind of person like me, if you're just pulled to Egypt, you have to know, you have to find the truth, you have to see it and experience it. You're never going to understand Egypt from pictures and videos. You can get an idea, but you'll never really feel what's going on there.
It was so big. Yeah. I mean, I was expecting like in Europe, you go to an ancient site and there'll be one wall, and they're like, oh, here's, the paintings from like 1500 years ago or something, or there's no hieroglyphics, but, a few statues. But then you go to Egypt and it was like giant temples just covered with the stuff, everywhere you look is like,
Yeah.
more hieroglyphics, more statues, more towers. I mean, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Because it's so dry, I guess it just keeps it perfectly. It never rains, so it's just.
Yeah.
I was amazed.
Well, like compared to Greece, even, or things, it's like, not to downplay any of these other civilizations that came later, but they're all mimicking Egypt. Everyone's trying to copy Egypt. In the ancient world, even, that when they want real wisdom, they're going to the source, which is Egypt, because it has these things, even if things are carved so beautifully in other countries as well. In Egypt, you're seeing it in these stones that you can just visually, unconsciously at least tell these things are extremely hard stones. The things that the Greeks did with marble, for instance, the Egyptians have with granite, you
Yeah,
know?
diorite.
Diorite, yeah.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, amazing statues, just the black diorite. You say diorite or is it diorite?
I think it's either.
Yeah,
But
amazing.
yeah, diorite, granite, we're talking 7, 8 on the Mohs scale. We're approaching diamond here. Copper tools, for instance, are I think down in the 2 to 3 or 4. It's like, which it's just insane when you say that
Yeah,
that's what's carving diorite or diorite, um, and basalt, and some of these stones. It's just there must have been a reason for you. I mean, the reason for one thing was that they had this obsession with eternity and what they wanted to set in stone. Literally, they wanted that to last forever. There was a reason for that, and there's a reason why it's so mysterious to people who go back now, and you know, um, you just have this reaction to it, whether or not you understand what's happening to you, at least on a subconscious level and on an emotional and vibrational level. These stones are actually interacting with your own body's field and making you feel, whether or not you understand what's going on, you're actually interacting with the temple when you're inside of it, and it's changing you in certain ways that are designed specifically to affect your consciousness and to bring forward these emotional and spiritual revelations and reactions. So
I
it's
had like, and I don't know, but I felt like my teeth tingling in certain sites, like the step pyramid and in a few of the temples. I don't know if just higher energy or something, or if I was imagining it, but I don't. It's not normal. I don't know. And the Valley of the Kings. When I walked inside the giant, it's like whenever I'm in a giant limestone structure or near yeah, that was it, near the step pyramid. When I'm ever near a giant limestone structure inside of it. And
Mhm.
actually, it was weird. When I went in the step pyramid, I felt nothing. And then when I went back outside, it was like I could feel my teeth like
Huh.
tingling
Interesting.
again. Like, yeah, I was cold, like I was out in cold wind or something, but I wasn't.
Well, there's actually there's what's called a vibrational hospital or a frequency hospital. It's a healing center it's kind of, if you got the Joseph pyramid, the step pyramid, it's off to the side there.
Yeah, it's
Like
like
if
the 14
or
thing that you lean your head in and do the
yeah,
frequencies.
there are these niches you can stick your head into. Some of them, it's like you can hum and it'll reverberate back into your head and into your whole body. And these are you can. There are different ways certain parts of that area work. Some of them, there's one at least that you can stick your head into, and you don't have to make any sound yourself. You'll hear like it sounds like a jumbo jet's flying over. All of a sudden, when you pull your head out, it's gone. When you stick your head back in, this is either some vibrations coming up from the planet naturally, or water moving underneath it, perhaps, or something. You're hearing this incredibly loud vibration that's coming from something. You don't have the source, but when you stick your head in this hole, you hear it. And yeah, other ones are like certain ones are tuned to specific frequencies. It might be for specific diseases or things like that. Like today, we know specific frequencies will wipe out specific diseases, cancers, things like that. But it was considered to be a hospital. I was walking through there with my friend Patricia Albion, who's trained under Abdel Hakim Albion, who's a very respected elder, passed a decade or so ago. But he spoke a lot about this thing and how it worked. Actually, he said there's one area, it's kind of might be not make sense to some people, but the way it works, he's describing that someone would lay on the table in the front, and then the healer would go in to these places in behind it and actually somehow be able to see what's going on in the body of the person lying down on the table in order to help and run frequencies through their body, as part of the healing process, which is very interesting to think about as well. But I'm not describing that enough. well enough to actually explain. But if I'm actually going to put out a video with Patricia when I was walking around there with her, and she was explaining it soon, and you can
That
see.
was just in November, right? You were just there the same time as me, I guess, or maybe the week after.
Yeah. Well, you were there in. I mean,
The
that video.
first 2 weeks in November, I was there, 1 to 12 November. Or
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was there last in November to December of 2024. But yeah,
yeah,
you went with JP Haig and Ross Coulthard.
yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been talking with JP a lot. He's been very supportive of our project, um, and Ross Coulthard as well. He's been open to trying to help us with an interview at some point. We haven't set anything up yet, but he said he's open to covering this story. So yeah,
Yeah, he's super.
might have been there at the same time.
Because my buddy, his dream is to go to Egypt, and I've been pushing him, and I got to talk him into getting his passport renewed and everything. And he was looking for a trip, and I said I'm planning. I was going to do Turkey in October 26th, and then it'll be Egypt in the spring. Um,
Yeah.
I think it'd be so. It was so fun as a group, Like I didn't have to explain myself. Like they knew more about UFOs and stuff than I did. A lot of them were like just up to date, like addicts on the all the information.
Mhm.
So I'd ask them, oh, what about this? It was really
Yeah,
cool.
I've ended up having some really good talks with people on Egypt tours about that stuff too, which is cool. But yeah, I'm working on setting up my own tour there hopefully soon. I've been working on it for years. I have a dream tour, and yeah, honestly, Armando and Filippo have said they're open to setting up something with me. We could do one together, which would be very cool. But yeah, I'm not sure if it can work out for this year or not. I have two different guides I could possibly use for November or December of this year, but basically I'd have to figure it out now. I'm trying to see if it's possible. Otherwise, we'll look at the spring or next fall maybe, but it would be amazing to go
That
with
would be
Fleet
amazing with those two guys.
and probably Bill and Richard as well from my films. That's my team. It's like we're two different trios that are joining forces now between the Coffer Project, and I've just been working with Bill and Richard, um, that were in my films. But it would be cool to join them all up and do a mega tour, with add-ons too. I want to do a tour that actually goes, for one thing, the main tour to Amarna and to Fayoum, which almost no one goes to. It's between the south and the north in this stretch of the Nile that most people just fly to the south and then fly back to the north.
Yeah.
So all the pyramids are basically in the north and all the temples in the south, but we're actually going to go by ground along the Nile so that we can stop at Fayoum and Amarna, which are very important, almost never included on the tours. And then have an add-on also, at least one to go into the Western Desert from Cairo, which is really beautiful.
Cool.
Either the Bahariya Oasis or the Siwa Oasis, where you just go out into, I mean, we would be able, this could probably be a smaller group as the after or before tour add-on, but we'd be able to go and camp with the Bedouin in the desert, which is otherworldly. It's amazing
Mm.
experience. So yeah, I'm working on a pretty exciting tour. We'll see when it can come out, but I might be able to join some other friends tours this year at least, if not set up my own. But lots of plans for that, so we'll see.
Do you know what is the deal with they maintain the tomb story? Like I didn't get any impressions at all that any of the pyramids were tombs. They didn't. They haven't even found a body, right? I think they found like one sarcophagus in a pyramid once.
They've never found
Not even
any
one.
in I mean, well, they did find these boxes in all three actually. Sadly, the one from Menkaur's pyramid was actually pulled out by Colonel Howard Weiss in the 1800s, and they shipped it off to the British Museum. And guess what? The ship sank.
Oh no shit.
Shipwrecked.
Wow.
The sarcophagus, the box that was in Menkaur's pyramid, in its king's chamber, if you want to call it that, gone. Bottom of the ocean.
Wow.
lost it on the way to the British Museum. And that one actually had these amazing inscriptions on it. A symbol that I call the Hall of Records glyph, because it's what's on the King Tutmosis IV's dream stele, right in the Sphinx's front paws. There's this symbol, and I think that ties into these archives or record halls that were underneath. And there was clues to it. There's that same pattern shown on that sarcophagus, the box that's now dropped. But I'm hesitant to
Mm.
call them sarcophagi because I don't think that's really
Yeah.
was their function. It did play that role potentially in some sense, metaphysically or metaphorically. But these boxes, they had many functions. They could heal you. If you laid down in the king's chamber in that box, um, especially when the pyramid was at full force, really put together and all the components in place, I think you would have been healed, for one thing, of almost any disease, just by laying down in that box for some time. And it was also used for ritual initiations of the adepts in the mystery schools. And that's what it was really. It was a ceremonial. You would go in there and you would basically, it's these boxes also, I think, serve as like psychic enhancement or thought enhancements. They could enhance your own clairvoyant faculties and abilities. So, they could be used in essence to be training you in remote, astral projection or remote viewing. That's part of what these initiations were about, is basically training you and teaching you what you are outside of your body, what your astral form is. And this was part of the tests and initiations, is, in according to one source, I don't even remember which, but I'd heard in one point that one of the tests would be you would have to lay down in that box, and the lid that used to exist to it supposedly would be placed over top it. You'd be pitch black sealed into that box, and you'd have to report on things that were happening in the far corners of Egypt from there in order to prove that you could leave the body, you could separate yourself from the body, and actually remote view, project out. So, yeah, no, they're not tombs.
Yeah.
The idea that the pyramids themselves are tombs is ridiculously, absurdly outdated. I mean, by
Yeah.
the time I was born, they should have already been over that a long time ago. But it's not to say that it has nothing to do with death. They call it the Giza necropolis. It does have something to do with death. And the underworld of Giza is the underworld that you're going to traverse after death. It's a physical replica, and you have these underground pitch black labyrinths all over the world in the ancient Greek mysteries, the Orphic and Eleusinian mysteries. In Mexico, for instance, at Mitla, there's another. In Chavín de Huántar in Peru, all these cultures around the world not only have these elaborate underground mazes that you have to traverse in some of these rituals, initiations, but a lot of times there's also patterns and motifs carved into the stone that are suggestive of, they're kind of psychedelic. They're kind of um, indicating the use of psychotropic plants, medicines, things, as if you were as if the intention is for you to actually enter into a different state of consciousness, go down underground in pitch black and solve this labyrinth that you can't even see. If you think about what could actually induce the mental state of comprehending what you are outside your body, it's beyond something like a simple sensory deprivation chamber. If you have to navigate a labyrinth in pitch black, not seeing, just feeling, it's a simulation of death, essentially. And when you pass through that, you end up learning something about your own soul. So that's something globally present, that all these shamanic cultures, animistic religions of the world, they were all doing things like that. And I think Giza is kind of the master copy of that idea. That is the ultimate underworld down there. And the pyramids were a part of that process of bringing you through that whole transition to understanding who and what you really are. So yeah, there are hundreds of tombs at Giza
Yeah.
underneath the ground, but no, the three pyramids are not tombs, and they never were.
Yeah.
Um, they're many things, but tombs is one of the only things they are not, I would say. So that's my take, yeah, generally on it.
That was definitely my impression going inside. In all the temples, you remember they have like the woman or man or god or whatever holding like a vial, and out of the vial will be like some smoke or essence or something. That could easily be some sort of psychotropic drug, like that's kind of what I considered it.
Well, I think yeah, there were times where we can find even some of these cups that have remnants of certain chemicals in them, and we can definitely say that there were substances like that used at least at certain times in certain places with some of the cults that were prevalent at the time. But also, I think, for the most part, the Egyptians were doing it in ways that didn't. The earliest and the most pure of the mystery schools at the earliest times, I think it didn't necessarily involve drugs like that. But probably more in later ages, they were using substances to enhance that ritual. But we know that at least the acacia tree, for one thing, was extremely revered by the Egyptians, and that does have a very high DMT content in it.
Hmm.
The white and blue lotus both have certain, they've, uh, yeah, bordering on psychedelic hallucinogenic properties, but more, they just give energy, and they give, I'd call them, um, I don't know, consciousness altering. I think it would be fair to say that they have certain properties like that, but very powerful and pure kind of plants that were considered extremely sacred. Some of them did have some of these chemicals in them, so you have to fit that in. But yeah, I think the ultimate goal of it was to teach you how to access these other states of consciousness without needing substances.
Hmm.
But they were tools used at certain times or places. Certainly in other countries, the Greeks used what they called soma, which was this mixture, it was some recipe, a secret concoction of different things that was clearly hallucinogenic in some sense. So yeah, there's a lot of, you can look at Terence McKenna talking about the food of the gods and showing all these, how we've always had a relationship with some of these plants and substances and chemicals that can be extracted from them. But yeah, there were things in Egypt that went beyond that even, and showed people how to reach those states without using drugs or things like that. But in a lot of times they were considered sacred.
The other thing I was kind of surprised by was the astrological signs were everywhere. We're just not trained at all on the zodiac. You don't learn anything about it through any sort of schooling, and then it's in the newspaper, but it's like as a joke, like, oh, you're
Mhm.
gonna read that. And but when I got to Egypt, it was like everywhere, and I was like, holy shit, this was Egyptian. I didn't know the zodiac was this big Egyptian thing. What was your take on that?
Yeah,
And like when you went on
yeah.
the Ibrahim tour as well, like the stargates, do you think it's somehow
So
related to transporting, maybe astral projecting to like these other star systems or something?
I think that's definitely yeah, I do believe it. I was gonna say it's definitely possible, but I'd say based on what I know, it's more probable and likely that there were stargates. Yeah. That they literally write the word Stargate on so many of these temples. If
Yeah,
you did tour with Muhammad, he probably showed you a few places where it actually you see a star and a gate and like a leg saying you can walk through this. Like
yeah,
they sometimes they are literally laying out very, very obviously, but it's people are gonna not have a hard time understanding how this um you see these boxes like I'm talking about. I believe those are a form of, if you want to talk from quantum mechanics or quantum physics, we could call it being quantum entanglement. That's another word for sympathetic resonance. when you have these stones that you pull up from the ground, let's say you pull two of these massive stones from the same bedrock and you put one of them on Mars and one in the Great Pyramid. They are built of the exact same mother stone. They have the exact same vibratory frequency. It is not impossible, I'll say at least, for someone to lay down in the box at Giza and be instantly psychically connected to someone who's laying down in a box on another planet, even,
Yeah.
or in other places on our planet. You know, we find these boxes in Cambodia, in Peru, in Mexico. These could have been like a psychic telephone line almost, just through the frequency, instantly being able to connect to someone in another one, which would be connecting your consciousness, not physically, not you go in and suddenly you pop out over there.
Yeah.
Although that kind of thing can happen too, I believe, in some cases. Not maybe through the boxes, but this idea of sympathetic resonance or quantum entanglement, where these, vibrations are identical, they will create a link through time and space that's, can be instantly a connection, potentially, yeah, between other planets, between even other star systems. So when you understand how advanced this stuff is at the pyramids, how these shafts pinpoint and hit specific stars, how all of them are the constellations actually laid out on the ground, not just the three pyramids in Orion, which most people know about, but there's 50 or 60 of the pyramids in Lower Egypt are all laid out along the Nile, with the Nile being the Milky Way and these being the brightest stars above it. And you're totally right. You see the zodiacal signs all over the place. And the ceiling of the Temple of Esna, the Temple of
Yeah.
Khnum, that one has amazingly just been restored. It was all blacked out when I first saw it, and they've just restored all the colors. You have the Dendera Zodiac
And
and the ceiling
yeah.
of Dendera. All of these are actually much later too, compared to the Sphinx itself, for instance, which I believe is a marker of the age of Leo, which is putting it back at the very most recent to about 10,500 BC, as Bavall and Hancock and everyone discussed. That was the most recent dawn of the age of Leo, or the last time when the Sphinx would have been looking at the heliacal rising of Leo, which means when it rises right with the sun. That only happens once every precessional cycle of 26,000 or 25,920 years. So there's only one time every 26,000 years when the sun actually sees, when the Sphinx actually sees what's considered the birth of Leo, when it rises with the sun on the equinox. So nobody has really addressed that before as much as John Anthony West himself. He was the one, before he wrote his book called The Serpent in the Sky, he wrote a book called The Case for Astrology. This one is really important because he shows why the zodiac is so important to the Egyptians. He shows that the zodiac symbols we have today actually go back way earlier than the first written languages. Those symbols go all the way back through, into Sumer and stuff. The lion, the scorpion, the bull, they were followed every 2,000 years plus. They would shift their symbolism, the statuary, the temples, they would shift from the bull to the ram to the fish. And every couple thousand years, they would switch the ruling deity that the sun came through. It was a solar power ruling through a specific sign of the zodiac. And if you're not recognizing that the Egyptians were working on those kinds of timescales and that they did have this whole set of zodiacal symbols laid out long before they even had written language, as far as we know, you're missing a very huge central part of what Egypt is. Because, yeah, people take it as a joke these days. If they, understand the influences,
Yeah.
they might take it a little more seriously. But most everyone, practically no one understands that these signs were extremely important, and they do go all the way back to the beginning of human culture. And they were considered the most important things back then. They did have meaning. So, yeah, it's a good point to bring up. Appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, that blew my mind, the zodiac signs. And then kind of the final thing was you mentioned there about the Sphinx, 10,500 years. I was blown away, obviously, about the Great Pyramid, the blocks, moving the stones. That's all crazy. But even if they had built it, like I was just amazed there was not a single drawing, or like there wasn't a single hieroglyph of like them like loading a stone, or like cut like one picture, anything, a papyrus drawing of them like knocking a stone out, or like carrying the stone, or there was nothing. Have you heard of any single like plan or something? Like how are you going to build a giant pyramid with no plans like written anywhere or drawn down, or like
Yeah.
bureaucracy? It would take huge bureaucracy to just organize that many people. Like, is there
Yeah.
any documentation at all?
There is there's very little into there's some reliefs that show blocks being moved by boats, at times, things like that. But as far as being connected directly to records of the pyramids themselves being built, there's practically basically nothing. Basically nothing. There are there are a couple cartouches and names written, for instance, in the relieving chambers above the king's chamber, which are controversial and not verified. And a lot of people think were graffiti fakes when these chambers were first discovered. But they say supposedly the names of some of the workers of the Gang of Khufu talking about working on it, but that obviously could have been added much later when it was first discovered, even. And they won't let us do any testing on the paint or the pigment, so it's like there are no hieroglyphs anywhere on any of the pyramids themselves at Giza. um, there's one symbol technically that's actually right in front of the north face corridor going in, which is the Akhet symbol, which is these two mounds with the sun rising in between them. And that's a very important symbol, which represents the horizon. And I think it's telling you the Great Pyramid is sometimes called Akhet Khufu, and that Akhet is meaning the horizon of Khufu, or Khufu on the horizon, or something like that, which is telling you that the Great Pyramid is a device that uses the horizon, that it is looking towards, the horizon, or in some sense, it's connected to that. But there are no records, for instance, of Khufu building the Great Pyramid. There are no records of Khafre building the Sphinx or the Second Pyramid or Menkaure. There is nothing directly stating that these structures came from them. And I do concede that it's very likely that these Fourth Dynasty kings worked on the pyramids, did something there, added their own thing to it. It's very possible Khafre was in charge of overseeing the renovation and reconstruction, the recarving of the Sphinx's head, for instance. But I've just talked to Manu Safe today about this, he's done the most amazing research to discover that there are all of these references and records of this fully lioness statue before the Sphinx. Before it had this human head, it was a lioness, female lion named Mahit, who was considered the guardian of the royal archives underneath it. It was there at least 500 years before Khafre's time, being referenced in hieroglyphic depictions and
Wow.
images, all of this stuff. I mean, being referenced in context, saying this is a statue that was placed at the peak, at the point of the delta of the Nile, that was facing east, that had all these things. It's nailing it out. This statue was there. It has linguistic connections to a great flood, to a great deluge or catastrophe, all of this stuff. In his book Under the Sphinx, we just went over all this material in a video I did with him, and we actually did two in a row, and the second one was more about the Temple of Edfu, which was also confirming all these stories of Atlantis, basically, of Plato's Atlantis, of some of this Edgar Casey information. And it's kind of I don't know, meandering away from the question you asked me, but there's a lot of information there that actually gives a lot of context to who the first people of Egypt were, who the first immigrants were coming in, and literally referencing the word Atlantis itself as an island that went through this catastrophe and these beings came from. the root, at least, of the word Atlantis, which was Utlant, basically. And the Greeks would always add this is to a lot of the words.
I thought, yeah, I remember now. Temple Edfu or what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the really tall walled ones.
Huge, huge
Yeah,
walls.
giant wall. That one was super cool. That's right. I remember it talked about people coming from Atlantis. Maybe like these are the immigrants.
Yeah, a lot of correspondences in the timeline as well to what Plato said.
That's right.
Same, lining up perfectly.
That's crazy. Well, awesome, man. Thanks a lot for your extra time.
Yeah.
Yeah, for setting up the Beyondy interview. That was great. Too bad it didn't work.
Oh yeah. Well, we'll get that done. And yeah, I know I'm gonna let you bring most of the questions to him when we get to talk to him on the 9th. I know he was excited to do this with us too, but he said something came up today that he really
Yeah.
had to take care of. So we understand because they're all really busy. But
Have you seen any UFOs? Like, I'd have to ask for my audience, my patrons, YouTube. Have you seen any? Well, I remember that Danon interview. Were you at that event and did like a bunch of UAPs show up or UFOs?
I went to the first and second annual Galactic and Spiritual Informers Connection. That's the conference set up by my friend Danny Henderson. And I did a bunch of interviews with Danny, and I just recently did one with Elena as well. But they're
I saw
both
that. That was a really good one. Yeah, you explained a lot of this, a lot of your background, and everything.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't go to the third one though in Colorado last year, and I didn't go to the one that just happened in the UK a couple weeks ago. But I did see, yeah, there was a bunch of craft showed up to the first one. I have footage of all these lights in the clouds moving around in the very first annual one. On the third year, Elena actually said, "We've got confirmation from my people upstairs. They're going to show up with a whole fleet and a TR-3B." Which for, maybe your audience knows what those are,
Yeah.
but that's the triangular reverse engineered craft, which are definitely not extraterrestrial. They are human made craft that are reverse engineered from supposedly XET ships that have been found, but they're very easy to distinguish, especially when they fly this low because they're triangular. They always have these three lights in the corners.
And a red in the middle, I think. Or
Yeah, and you could see, not only these fleets flying in formation much higher over, and this was in Colorado in a no-fly zone, by the way, and then this TR-3B rolled right over top where it's down low enough for you to see that it's a triangle. So I have never ever in history heard of anyone calling out in advance a mass sighting and saying, "Come to this conference in Colorado, and you're going to see a whole fleet appear." And
so
then
there's
it
got to be
actually
videos or something. I haven't seen any of the videos or anything. I didn't even hear about it.
Oh,
So
no,
just like,
there's 1,000 people saw that one after Elena said it was going to happen, and those videos are on Danny and Elena's channel. I could send you some of the links. They're
yeah, I
very
totally need to check that out because I saw it. You mentioned in the interview with Elena, and I was like, "What is this?"
yeah. Well, she said something like, I mean, yeah, there. I guess some more showed up in this one a couple weeks ago in the UK, but I told her. Yeah, she was joking about it. Some people were calling it like geese in fluorescent pants or something. I'm like, okay, sure. But I was joking back to her in a comment like, I hope the Galactic Federation of Geese in Fluorescent Pants show up to our conference in Dubai
Yeah.
because I would love to see some ships when Zahi's right there next to us and he can see them too, to be honest.
If all those people are going to be there, I could do interviews and maybe
Yeah.
pay back with the travel.
Well, that's going to be me, Armando Filippo, Sasha Stone, Elena Denon, Dan Willis, all of whom are friends of mine, and then Zahi, who I haven't met yet, but hopefully we'll be friends after that.
Yeah, hopefully.
I'm just, yeah, it's like I'm hoping we have a chance to have a real respectful dialogue with him. Is what I'm saying because
Yeah.
you can have conversations with him. He can be reasonable to people. That does happen. It has happened, especially more so off camera. if you have him on camera, he's really going to have to play his role. But people who have talked to him, after the fact, having dinner, having a cup of wine or something, um, laying low, he does speak a little differently, quite a bit differently off
Mm.
camera than he does on. And I'm definitely not going to try and come at him with some attack journalism. I want to respectfully open him up, thank him for some of the work he has done. That is, he's provided a lot more evidence and things to look at than a lot of these alternative researchers have. Whether or not he deserves credit for all of them, or whether or not he's right in preventing all these other researchers from being able to get the access to do that kind of work. In the end, he is sharing. He's bringing some things out and some new stuff that's exciting, which I admit. But we all know he's a gatekeeper. He's the guy, and it doesn't even matter what you think of Zahi. It doesn't matter what you think of him personally. The fact is, no one on Earth should have that much power over this situation. No one should
Mm.
be the gatekeeper of Giza.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're, JFK or the most noble ruler, Plato himself. It's like, um, no one should be able to say that you need this person to like you if you want to do work in Giza. That should never be the case.
Yeah.
It should be merit based. It should be evidence based. We are bringing forward so much evidence before the Coffer Project even happened, that for them to still be denying our permit, especially when we're showing that it is in an area that poses absolutely no risk to any of the monuments there, which was the big one they used back in the 90s. Oh, we can't let everyone drill right around the Sphinx. No, we're talking about a pile of rubble off to the east of the wall where it can't possibly hurt anything. And we know there's tunnels. So the more evidence we're bringing forward, the more difficult it is for them to be blocking our permit, especially if the world takes note of this, if the
Yeah.
world realizes and gets behind us and says, look, we think these guys should be able to just go look down there. What is stopping them from, what's stopping you? Why are you preventing further research from taking place when we at least clearly have enough evidence to suggest it requires an on-site investigation? It's obvious to
Yeah.
everyone. Who would be against that, whether they believe these scans or not? What could possibly be the excuse not to do an on-site investigation if it's not going to pose any risk to any of the monuments whatsoever? If we bring our own money, if we bring the top archaeologists, all the right people, all the right equipment. So it's getting harder and harder for them to say no to us,
Yeah.
basically. And at a certain point, we're going to hit that sweet spot where they have to say yes. So
Sweet, man.
wish us luck with that,
Yeah.
everyone.
Good luck. Yeah. I saw just my own research. You could do an endoscope below the Osiris Shaft. Pretty much wouldn't damage anything.
I'll tell you something that I haven't said publicly at all yet, but I brought my endoscope last trip, and I did along the entire Sphinx Causeway. There are some holes in the Sphinx Causeway between the stones, and Yusuf Aliyan really brought this forward on Ben Van Kerkwick's channel with Ben Uncharted X. They've done some videos about this where Yusuf was showing him you can push sand into these little holes on the Sphinx Causeway, which is where the Osiris Shaft is. And the sand keeps filling into the holes.
Yeah.
After thousands of years of sands blowing over, something is still not full down there.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really important. And yeah, the last time I was there, I did bring my endoscope. We did. I'll show some of this footage very soon in one of the episodes of Secret Underworld coming up. But Bill and I did actually just take a little water break, sit down on, on the causeway, and I'm just cramming this endoscope camera down into some of those holes.
Wow.
So we really wanted to see if we could get it down deep enough where it would actually break into some of the chambers that we already had the GPR scans of. So
So you have the radar scans. Yep. That's awesome.
because they had already indicated some very interesting stuff all along the Sphinx Causeway. And also very close. I mean, we did the whole eastern base edge of the Khafre Pyramid. We have the anomalies. We have GPR views of these entrances into the chambers the coffer project's showing us now.
Wow.
Not
And
just
so you,
where the
it matched. You're saying the SAR scan, the tomography matched what you guys found?
Yes, it looks
That's
very
amazing.
much like there's two entrances in the front of the eastern base edge, and they have two tunnels coming out from the JED structures they're talking about right in front of those two. I'll show some of that in my documentary. Should be out on Sunday. That I finally have a good 3 hour chunk of the most important material regarding the whole coffer project. And then we'll get a little further into it probably. That'll, I think, will be part 4 of the secret underworld of Giza, and then part 5 will be bringing William and Richard back on, and we're going to probably show that endoscope footage in that one, and a few other things about the proofs that there is a tunnel actually going straight from the Sphinx to the coffer pyramid, and that's our entrance. That's how we get into this stuff under the coffer pyramid. But we'll also be revisiting the tunnel we know that goes straight into the Great Pyramid as well. The entrance that probably exists on the southwest corner of the Great Pyramid as well. So we have 5, 6, 7 different entrances into the structures they're showing us, both in the Khafra and Khufu pyramids. And we're going to get a lot more into that.
And
But
so all of it matches up with the SAR tomographies.
yes, especially this one tunnel from the temple complex in the east to the Great Pyramid. This is what part 3 of the Secret Underworld shows.
Okay.
It's on their 2022 report. That was before this new stuff. But yeah, we had a view of this tunnel coming in from the east that I was one of like 3 or 4 people alive who William had trusted with this model that he had built based on eyewitness account from a friend of ours who actually was digging under his basement and found this entire temple complex and described it firsthand. And but that actually, the tunnel itself that's running from there was discovered in 1982. They knew about this tunnel
Wow.
back then. So some of them did, and they've never mentioned it. They've never been telling anyone. So this is part of the reason why we exposed that entire temple complex in part 3. We would have been more careful about that, except we know that they already know, and they're already in there raiding it and robbing it and stealing the heritage of humanity, the most important artifacts on Earth.
Hmm.
They are secretly attempting to get into all of these chambers inside the Great Pyramid. And that's why we're in a race against the black market, against the
Wow.
corrupt parts of the ministry that choose to work in the shadows and hide all this. So we want to get in there before they steal everything, basically. We want to
Wow.
prove what's there, because if they already know it's there, then it's not going to hurt us. We're not going to give them more information to help them raid it quicker. They're already in there. So we showed everyone the exact locations in Secret Underworld because it can't hurt to tell the world, that the bad guys already know. So yeah, well, it's cool to talk about a little of this beforehand, and then when we chat, I'll come back for the 9th. We'll have this discussion with Filippo, and I hope you can bring a lot of the questions about the radar and stuff.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
can go into
Yeah,
it.
check out. I hadn't watched part 3, so I knew it'll be cool to check that out. And then
Yeah, look at that.
awesome.
I don't know if you saw the Biondi protocol either, but that's my 2 hour interview with Filippo and Armando.
I watched that as well. I think that's where I didn't get this quote from here, but yeah, I watched that as well. So have you had Malanga? Have you interviewed him?
No,
Yeah.
not yet. I've been speaking to him, but I don't think he speaks English really. So he's not been part of any of these English interviews. But hopefully we can do a translated one with him soon. Hopefully, yeah, we're actually talking about setting up an official English channel for the team that would be continuously ongoing. We've got some pretty big other names, want to get into interviews with them that I might be in also, which could be cool. But yeah, hopefully coming soon. I hope you
Right.
can
Well,
make.
yeah, thanks again. And we'll see you at least on the 9th. I'll check out your work and just keep in email touch before that. Good luck with all your work.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. That was an eye-opening conversation with Trevor Grassi for me, breaking down the SAR tomography controversy, Zahi Hawass's claims on Rogan. I didn't know all that background information, and what might actually lie beneath the Giza plateau. Next up, I'm speaking with Salvatore Pais, the inventor behind those wild Navy patents, and then a deep technical dive with Filippo Biondi himself with Trevor Grassi to see if the science holds up. So please like this video and subscribe to get notifications of when that stuff comes out. If you want to support this kind of independent research, consider joining my Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. I really couldn't do it without these amazing people. You'll get early access, behind the scenes updates, and more. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching and being part of Lehto Files. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.